Hi, dear viewer here on YouTube. For my Dutch followers, I'm going to do this introduction in English because my guest of this episode he is Dutch, but we are doing this interview in English because that language suits him better. Who is he? He is Bentinho Massaro, and the last episode I did with him was such a success that we're doing a new episode. If you don't know Bentinho, to summarize who he is, Bentinho is a spiritual inspirator. I think he inspires you to be spiritual, to maybe search for enlightenment. In this interview, which will start in like 1 minute, we're going to discuss a few things. Bentinho explains his definition of spirituality, and he goes deeper on 2 levels of spirituality. The empowerment level, and he gives some really concrete pieces of advice for this level of spirituality, the empowerment version of spirituality, and the enlightenment version of spirituality. I think Bentinho is very close to enlightenment. Maybe he is. Maybe you could say he is enlightened. So he gives us a very interesting thoughts on how to achieve that if you want to start your path to enlightenment as well. And Bentinho explains how you can understand your emotions, how you can understand negative emotions better. This is an explanation that really got me, and maybe this will change my life. So I hope the same for you. And last but not least, Bentinho shares with us his vision not only on happiness, but also his vision on relationships, on love and relationships. And maybe it's a little bit of a painful definition because it challenges you to change your current Western definition of love and relationships. And I think that's all that I want to say about it. It's very, very interesting, fascinating, and inspiring. So it's a great honor that he is here for the second time. Go enjoy this interview. Here is Bentinho Massaro. 100% base! Okay, Bentinho, welcome back.
Thank you.
Very good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
And it was special to me last time.
Mm-hmm.
It was cool to get to know you, feel your energy, and to interview you. And we got a lot of great responses. I just read a few of them. A lot of people were quite enthusiastic about the interview. So yeah, that's the reason why we're here for a part 2 in English. So this time I'm the one who's awkward with the language. And yeah, so much to talk about, and maybe let's just dive into this immediately. I got a lot of questions after the last interview about the path to enlightenment. So the people are really curious about the how-to. Maybe they're not, they don't have the intention to be really enlightened or something, but the path to a more enlightened or more conscious lifestyle, I think that's really tempting to them.
Right.
So I got a lot of questions about that. What is the path to enlightenment? And it's a super wide question, but can you elaborate on that?
Sure. I don't know if we addressed this in my... I'll try to talk a little slower also than I'm used to because it's in English.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if we talked about this in our previous interview, but spirituality as I found it can be sort of categorized in one or of 2 categories. One would be, and both are kind of understood under the name spirituality.
Yeah.
One is more about self-expression or self-actualization, like who are we, why are we here, but in a more relative sense, like as an individual, who am I, what's my purpose, how can I fulfill my dreams? So I call that either empowerment or self-actualization. And then the path of enlightenment or self-realization more has to do with, well, what am I at a really deep level, at a really changeless level, like beyond space and time, beyond this individual body and mind? What am I in sort of a more absolute sense? So that's the process if the questioners are interested about that, when they say enlightenment, then the process towards that enlightenment, so to speak, is a process of tracing our attention back to its source. Whereas empowerment also has to do with who we are, sort of on an inner level, but the focus is more on things. It's more on thoughts. It's on emotions. It's on belief systems. It's on our expressions in the world. How do we change things? How do we empower ourselves? So there's a lot of content in that version of spirituality, if you will, or that stream of thought.
Yeah.
Enlightenment is more about emptying ourselves out of contents, of objects, of attention, of the things that we're focused on. And it's more a journey into who is it that's focusing? Who is it that's hearing the sounds? Who is it that's seeing all this? Who is it that's knowing our thoughts and our emotions? So it's a process of finding the root of our attention itself, of that which makes us feel that we exist. So that's sort of in a nutshell, the path of enlightenment is to rediscover what in truth is always already the case. And nowadays that's kind of become, in these circles, a more popular understanding. Back in the day when I was seeking, that was still not so much around. Now everyone kind of says like you're already perfect and stuff. But there is which is true. But for me, it was a profound realization at the time that this consciousness that I was looking for, that the truth of who I am that I was looking for, that it is always already here. And that somehow it's not about becoming enlightened. It's not about changing ourselves or our emotions or our thoughts in order to become someone who is enlightened and has enlightened thoughts and emotions. It's, in fact, much simpler than that, though not always easy to realize, but it is very simple, mechanically speaking. In essence, it's very simple. When you realize that the state that we're looking for of happiness, because we're all looking for happiness, or in religious terms, you would say like, we want to know God or we want to be one with God. But in sort of our Western society, we just sort of seek happiness.
Yeah.
So it's really not different than finding that happiness to be always already here. And it just requires a shift of attention, which I just want to pause to see if you have any questions, but we can get into that shift in attention.
Yeah, maybe first you can give an example of so you say spirituality has like a enlightenment side and a empowerment side. Maybe you can give some examples on the empowerment side. I think that's the side that's maybe more concrete, maybe more easy, more earth. And can you maybe give a few examples and maybe even some tips or pieces of advice to explore that side for yourself?
For sure. So an example of a practice of the empowerment category would be the question, what's my calling? What's my purpose? Sometimes people call it purpose. What's my calling? What calls me forth? What, in a sense, what makes me happy? What truly inspires me? What's my true excitement? Yeah. Because I grew up in this society. My parents told me this is true, this is true, this is not true, this is good, this is bad, and so forth. It's good to become this, it's bad to become that. And our society just further conditions us. So we become kind of encapsulated, imprisoned in our own ideas and beliefs, many of which we're not even aware are beliefs. So we just operate on a day-to-day basis, kind of like an actor on a stage in theater, but we're not aware of the fact that we're limited to the theater that we're assuming is true. So our entire life, there's this context of beliefs, there's the environment of beliefs, which kind of forms the stage, which narrows our entire experience to the stage of our assumptions and our beliefs. And if we don't investigate them, then all we can do is play around on that same stage.
And we make the playing field really small.
Exactly, right? It's really condensed and defined. So once we realize that, we have a lot of beliefs that maybe aren't even originally ours. Because when we were 2 years old, we didn't have these beliefs, right?
Yeah.
So they're not original to our being. They're taught, they're conditioned. Once we start to investigate them and we get a curiosity for why am I really here? What's really true for me? And what makes me happy, so to speak? Or what do I want to share with this world, give to this world? What do I want to come flow through me, through my mind and my body and my speech and my expression? That just when I do that, I feel alive, I feel connected, I feel inspired, I feel on fire. So that in a nutshell is kind of the empowerment path. So a practical nugget for this would be something a buddy of mine and myself, his name is Anurag, have taught in a lot of my retreats is what we call the calling work. And so we then help people to find out what their calling is. And it's a very simple process. And once you have that formula down, and once you kind of have found what your calling is, once you've found a name for it, once you're able to identify and feel what that calling is, now you can align all the elements of your practical life, of your daily life, to this vibration, to this feeling, to this essence, to this quality of why am I here. So once we're clear on that quality, now we can look at our lives, at all the components, our relationships, our activities, what we're prioritizing and focusing our energy into, and see, is this a reflection? Is this a true expression of that quality, of my calling? And if not, then you can begin to sort of eliminate a lot of these components and replace them with an architecture, with a lifestyle, if you will, with a focus, with components that are more conducive. They're better channels for that calling energy that we have identified. So, for example, and it's nice to have more time to do this. So, but I'll just give a brief glimpse of it, and people can try it out.
Yeah.
One way to kind of, and it's not about solidifying it, like, okay, this is my calling, and now it becomes this concept. It's really about the feeling state. It's about the vibration, if you will, the frequency, the state of being that you feel or are or experience once you've spotted your calling. And we use words to help us identify the calling, but it's not about the words. So the words can change over time and it can develop, but basically you want to get to this energy that when you feel that energy, it's like nothing else matters. It's like overwhelming sense of purpose. It's like this sense of, my life makes sense if I'm committed to this, right? And that's when a lot of the sort of superficial everyday questions and problems that we have start to fall away, because we're just so clear this true fire is burning bright as the sun. And so a lot of the things that used to bother us just don't bother us anymore. We're empowered by this clarity of, why am I here? What's the true essence of me being here right now in this form, in this shape? So one way to get to that clarity is to ask questions such as, and the way we frame it is that it's always in relationship to being of service to others. And there's several reasons for that. It's easier to find out that way what your calling is, and also because we believe for the vast majority of people, if not everyone, that is what their purpose is related to. It's their relationship to others, their expression to others. So a question could be, can you go back to a time when in that moment, maybe you're just watching a movie, maybe you weren't even involved in the action. Maybe you saw someone else perform the action or say those words or that event happen. Or maybe you were involved physically. But can you go back to a moment where you just felt so lit up that nothing mattered? There was this absolute moment of clarity. Can you?
Oh, it's a question for, yeah, totally.
Cool. So that's just one question. So let's go with that for now, especially since you have clarity around that. So how would you describe what you felt in that moment? If you had to give it a word or a sentence.
I would say on fire, the feeling that I had.
On fire, okay.
Yeah.
Now, if we put this into the formula is, my calling is, people experiencing ...
Yeah.
So in that moment, were there other people involved in that memory?
Yeah.
Okay. What if you? And this is another question to find it out as well. Is if you saw someone else experience ... a quality, an experience, a realization, an epiphany, an insight, a feeling. If you saw someone else experience this quality, whatever that is, you would also feel that quality. You would feel on fire. You would feel happy. So if you see a person experience what, do you feel like nothing matters? Nothing else matters.
So you mean because we're looking now for my purpose, right?
Right.
And the question is, during what activity do I make other people feel?
So that's the activity is what we're just using to imagine, to go back to a time when you felt that excitement.
Yeah.
But in that moment, what were other people experiencing?
I guess it was because maybe that makes it more clear. When I saw a speaker for the first time, a professional speaker being playful, being humoristic, and being inspiring, and at the same time, I have like a twinkle in the eyes, or how do you say that? A sparkle in the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And just my body went like on fire, like this is it for me. And so the other people in the room, they were participants of that event, and I guess they were pretty happy as well.
What were they experiencing? What was this person?
I guess inspiration, entertainment.
Mm-hmm. So if you saw this and you were not involved, but you saw a movie of people experiencing this quality of inspiration, potentially because of a public speaker, would you still have the emotion? Would you still feel the feeling?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the important parts of the calling is that we realize it's not about us as the ego. That's an important component. That's why the formula for the calling is, my calling is people experiencing ...
Yeah. Oh, cool.
So, and after you've found that formula for yourself, you don't have to hold on to it, but this is kind of how we identify the calling. So if you had to boil it down and say, my calling is people experiencing, what would that be?
Few things. I think it's somewhere in the neighbor of not only inspiration and entertainment, but also wholeness.
Wholeness, nice.
Wholeness, connection. When I can also watch a concert, either if it's Pink or Metallica, and when I see 50,000 people feeling the same thing, yelling the same thing, I get goosebumps, or I can even cry.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's it. Great. So when you said that, I was feeling it more coming from you than when you said inspiration and entertainment.
Yeah.
So that's how you narrow it down. And there's no black or white rules or anything. You can't do it wrong. It's just a matter of getting closer and closer and closer to the particular wording of what your calling is. Again, ultimately, it's not about the words, but it's a good process to get as clear on exactly what that frequency is that you're specifically here to express, that makes you light up. So try this one. As you imagine, again, like that concert, and you see all those people experience that, like, what would be the closest word? The word is not the thing, it's not the frequency, but what would be the word that most closely describes that feeling?
Yeah, well, the first thing that came up was magic.
Magic?
Magic,
nice. Nice. What else?
Passion. Also drive.
And what will make you like the happiest? Like if you saw that as a sense of completion, like hallelujah. Like if a whole crowd of 50,000 people experienced what state?
Yeah, then I think it's connection.
Connection?
Yeah.
Cool. And you said wholeness before also?
Yeah. So maybe that word is even better, that a lot of people experience the same thing. So like maybe even synchronicity or something like that. Like being one as a big group of people.
Cool. So oneness.
Yeah, oneness.
Sense of unity and wholeness.
Yeah, totally.
Great. So now if you write that down in that sense, or just remember it and say, okay, my calling is people experiencing wholeness, unity, oneness, connection, something along those lines.
Yeah.
People experiencing oneness, wholeness, and connection. If you repeat that a few times and you really, what's important is that when you say the words, if you say them too many times, they can kind of lose their energy. But when you just say them a few times, when you think of those words, it lights you up again. Like it reconnects you to that same energy, right? So if people can find that sort of definition of, okay, my calling is people experiencing ... If I see a group of people experience what, then I feel complete.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way to understand what our calling is. And it shouldn't be intellectual or mental. It should really be like you, when you started talking about the concert, your energy shifted, right?
Yeah,
you felt that like, oh, you were connecting consciously, you were connecting your attention to the vibration, the state of being that is vibrating, if you will, at the frequency of that energy, which the words describe as wholeness, oneness, connection. So once you have that, that's the first step, is to identify your calling.
Yeah. And maybe it's even more, because now that you talk about it, I get even a brighter picture. I think it's more that in that moment, people there are not an accountant or consultant or nurse or whatever. And in that moment, they're not stressed or fearful or thinking about emails. But in that moment, they're just in the moment, and they're happy, and they're themselves and experiencing. And that's why magic, I think, came up. That's what I experienced as magic.
Beautiful. Yeah. Free comes to mind also. When you say these things, it's like people experiencing their freedom from the labels, from the constraints, and in that freedom, they know their wholeness.
Yeah.
Magic. Cool. Yeah, so you can try. You can try these. You can try different ones and see, okay, which one is specifically it. And it's a good process to get really precise with it, knowing that ultimately it's not about the word. So don't get hung up on the word. But it's about finding the words or sentence that is closest to what your specific purpose is. And this is important because the more specific and precise it is, the more you're connected to your soul's blueprint, if you will, to why you're actually here, what actually is that core desire.
Yeah.
So people can continue to refine this, and it can change over the weeks and the months as you ask it. And you're like, oh, actually, it's this. I was calling it magic and wholeness and connection, but really it's people experiencing not being anything anyone else thinks they are, or just an example, right? Yeah. And you're like, wow, when I say it in that way, when I frame it in that way, I really feel the energy of it. Like, oh, this is it.
Yeah.
Like, so you get closer and closer and closer. So just use a label for now that gets as close as you can.
Yeah.
But I encourage people to refine that, to get more precise over time. Ask the question again, like, what really lights me up when I see people? What if someone else, if I could say one thing to my 5-year-old child, and I have to go to Mars on Elon Musk's spaceship or something, and I won't be seeing him for potentially ever, what would I say to my 5 or 7, let's say 8-year-old son or daughter? What's that one thing, that one quality that I would want them to experience in their lives?
Yeah.
And then you can put that into that sentence, the structure, the formula. My calling is... So avoid words like my calling is being a public speaker, because that gets the ego involved. And it actually is greatly distracting, because now if it's me being a public speaker, I'm going to align my life to being a public speaker. But with being a public speaker come all these other constraints and responsibilities and technicalities. So now I'm also a technician. Now I'm also an accountant. Now I'm also... Blah, 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 blah. It's really important that we stay super connected to the core frequency, that magic, if you will, of that vibration of why we're here. And it does feel like magic, like a mystery. When you tap into it, it feels like magical. So put it in the formula. This is why this formula exists. My calling is people, not me being, doing. People, which includes you. My calling is people experiencing bliss, or people experiencing that they're absolutely free, or people experiencing that everything is possible.
Yeah.
People, whenever you see that, how would you describe that? So then once you have that, now the second step of the process is to align all the components of your day-to-day life to this calling. So first you want to be able to feel it at will, just by saying that sentence, just by going back to such a memory, just by imagining people experiencing wholeness or liberation from who they thought they were. And now you look at your life, you just make a list of everything in your life, the main components of your life. So your relationships, your habits, your activities, your career or job, if you have one. And you just write all these down. And now you're going to categorize these. You can do 2 columns or you can do 3 columns. And you're going to see how does this element of my life, which takes up time and energy, how directly important or related is it to people experiencing wholeness? Mm-hmm. And then if you see that activity doesn't really seem to have anything to do with that frequency, you put it in the elimination column. It doesn't mean you have to drop it right away. Not everyone will. Some people will. Some things you will, some things you won't. But put it in the elimination column, and then you can give yourself 6 months or so to kind of get rid of everything that's almost opposite, makes you feel opposite to people feeling the freedom. Then the second column is things that are in alignment, that you want to even maybe increase your attention on, that you want to implement even more in the architecture of your life. So things that, for example, public speaking could lend itself very well to being a channel for people experiencing wholeness and freedom. Right? So then you put that in the column of positives or matching, like this fits. And then you can have a third column, which is like optimization. It may not be contradicting your calling. It may be helpful for your calling, but it's kind of like, it's like it needs some work. It needs some tweaking. Let's say your relationship to your partner right now does not reflect you really standing in your power of your calling. But there's a lot about that relationship that does really appeal to you, that does really kind of could fit that calling. So then instead of eliminating her, you could optimize your relationship. You could put some work in. You could upgrade it. So then you have these 3 columns, those that don't match, those that do match, and those that need some work. And then you just give yourself 6 to 12 months to consistently improve, make the architecture and the environment of your life match your true intention, your true calling in this life. And I guarantee you when you do that, a lot of the negative things we're accumulating in our lives, they just start to fall away. A lot of the dis-eases just start to fall away. And because you want to wake up every day and not be surrounded by this structure that has nothing to do with who you are. You want to wake up into a life where the structure, where the first thing on your menu that day somehow is not contradicting people feeling wholeness. You want to wake up inspired. So you want to set up an architecture that can channel your calling.
So you could maybe even name this calling minimalism or something like that. So you want to maximize your calling, and by that you want to minimalize all the dirt in your life that does not...
anything that does not help you ground that frequency of your calling, you want to consider changing, getting rid of. And indeed, you'll find that the clearer you are on who you really are, that state of being, the less you'll want a lot of the stuff that you've accumulated, because they came from a state of not really knowing who you are and why you're here. And so they are reflections of non-happiness, basically.
And then one more question before we go into the more enlightenment version of spirituality. When you started explaining this, you mentioned your life is like a stage of limited beliefs and stuff, or your beliefs get limited in your life. Once you've discovered your calling, you have to investigate your beliefs, something like that you said. And once we start to investigating our beliefs, we find a lot of limiting beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, the how to eliminate those limiting beliefs.
Cool. Well, beliefs have a purpose. They help us structure our experience of this quantum field. Because without the beliefs, without any beliefs, there would be no structural experience. Actually, our consciousness would be as if swimming in a void of potential. There would be no walls. There would be no dialogue. There would be no relationships. There would be no themes and patterns that we're exploring in life. So beliefs are what set the stage for us to have a specific, particular experience, for the waves to collapse into particles, if you will, to become specific. So beliefs are not bad or good. They serve a purpose, but they have a shelf life. They expire. They have an expiration date. If you've reached the expiration date of that belief system, it becomes a limiting belief system. But before that time, it's a supportive belief system, right?
Yeah, cool.
And a lot of people have experienced this, where a belief system, maybe they first got into NLP or like some kind of personal development thing, and like, whoa, this is cool. And then 5 years down the road, having practiced that, and now when they think of that concept, it's kind of like it no longer fits them. It's like constraining because they've moved beyond it. Yeah. So now it's time to let that one go because it's reached its expiration date. So first of all, that. Now, and here's kind of where the emotions come in. When we have a negative emotion, it is a guidance system. It's not random. It's not a random chemical in the body. Over time, if we continue negative patterns, there are chemical components and programming and hardwiring that happens in this intelligent system that we call the body. But essentially, emotions serve the purpose of guiding our attention back into alignment with who we really are. So when I experience a negative emotion, that's actually indicating that I am believing something about my circumstances or my life or myself or the other person that's not true, or at least not true from the standpoint of who I really am. It may seem true in the moment, it may seem true based on circumstance, but it's not true from my soul's point of view.
And that's when we experience a negative emotion.
Correct. And what people often think is the opposite, is I experience a negative emotion because this happened, or because you said that. But actually, you experience a negative emotion. Who experiences the emotion? You experience the negative emotion because you believe something about that person, or you believe something about your circumstances. You believe something about your finances. You believe something about your business. You believe something about your partner. You believe something about yourself that is not true according to your soul.
Wow.
According to this deeper intelligence that's produced all of this. Just like a wave or a fish perhaps, but let's say a wave that's part of the ocean. The wave cannot separate itself from the ocean. Let's say there's a current in the ocean that's going in direction A, but the wave thinks it's a separate little wave, and it now, out of its ideas and its conditioning, it believes something other than that movement of the ocean, of that greater intelligence in which it is inundated, surrounded by. So now it tries to go against the stream. That friction between the individual mind going against the intelligence of the greater mind or the greater flow, or call it higher self, call it soul, call it even God if you will, or source energy, or if we, with our thoughts, everything is vibration, if we go against the fundamental vibrations and the laws of the universe and the momentum of our soul, the direction of our soul, that friction, that opposing direction, like when you're holding on to a boulder in the river, you're feeling the friction of the water against you. But if you let go, the water around your skin is not producing any friction. You're going with the flow. Anytime we feel a negative emotion, it's because we believe something, we think something that's not true from the perspective of our soul. So this is a great revelation if we can start using emotions in this way. This is empowering because now I'm not a victim. I can change it.
Yeah, and this is great. I think this is the first 50%, and the other 50% is then we want to align, of course, with the truth of the soul.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
We want to surrender to the truth of the soul.
Well, do we really?
Great question.
Seems, I mean, I've worked with a lot of people, and it seems people say that, but they don't really want to. And this is where the arrogance of ego comes in. This is where the obstacle becomes our own will. Because our will is king when it comes to what we believe and what we insist is true. So people, when our minds are presented with an alternative view, if it contradicts what we have believed for so long, we may say consciously that we want happiness and we want to surrender to the greater intelligence of our soul. But when this alternative perspective is presented, we tend to fight it. We tend to resist it. We tend to resist our own happiness, our own intelligence. But, okay, assuming that overall, ultimately, we do want to go more and more in the direction of surrendering to that greater intelligence and being in that flow state more of the time and feeling that calling and that inspiration and aligning our ways of thinking and acting and believing with that frequency, with that flow, and therefore becoming happier, feeling more of our greater self, feeling more expanded, feeling more powerful, feeling more eternal, more infinite, and so forth, which is starting to approach enlightenment, which we can get into in a little bit. Okay, so back to your question then. Let's say that we do really want to realign our thoughts and beliefs with the flow of our soul.
Yeah.
Then we have to be really honest with what we're believing. Like, you can't heal unless you're sick of being sick. You won't take the medicine unless you're sick of being sick. So you got to be sick with your own suffering. You got to know it's self-produced. It's not caused by anything else. Suffering is the guidance system trying to catch your attention, but you're not listening. If we caught it in the earlier stages and we just start to feel a little uncomfortable because we start thinking in a negative pattern, or we start believing in lack, or we start believing that we're not lovable, or we're not worthy, or we're not valuable if this doesn't happen, or if only 5 people show up to our speaking engagement, right? It's like, well, if only 5 people show up when it's a room of 500 people, that means I am not valuable. I'm not worthy. I'm just a hoax. I'm just a fake. Whatever it is. Then that feeling is the sensation of us going against the current. That feeling of a negative emotion literally is the friction between God and the person, or between the higher self and the personal mind. So this is an indicator. Now, if we pay attention and we're sick of feeling the sickness or the negativity, then we're in a state of openness and willingness. Like, okay, what am I believing right now that makes me feel that way? So that's the practical aspect of it. So once we're willing and we know that the emotions are our guidance system, that positive emotions mean that our thought is an improvement upon our previous way of thinking, and that negative emotions are the opposite of an improvement upon our previous thinking, then now we have the openness and we have to ask ourselves, what must I believe is true about myself, or about this circumstance, or about life in general, in order to feel this way? Because you can't feel anything that you don't have a belief about. You don't feel anything about this table, right? You don't have an emotion about this table. Yeah. The only way you'd have an emotion about this table if it means something to you. For example, it's now part of the video. It's part of your podcast. People are going to see it. Will people think it's ugly or beautiful? Will this be representative of you? So now you've believing things about the table, and now you can feel something about the table. Yeah. But before all that, it's neutral. You don't feel anything about the table. So if I have an emotion, it must mean I have a belief about myself in relationship to this event, or about life, or about this event. So the question is, what must I believe is true in order to have this feeling when this happens? And then when you identify the belief, you can now begin to realize that it doesn't make a lot of sense. And you can't believe in something that doesn't make sense. Beliefs exist because something makes sense to us. But once we investigate it, once we bring greater awareness to it, once we become present to it, and we bring our more mature understanding of life to this belief, we will see that actually that belief doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
And once you've identified the belief and you see it makes no sense, you've automatically unbelieved in the belief.
Yeah.
And now you won't have the negative emotions in relationship to that event.
So you don't have to really install a new belief, but the consciousness of the fact that the belief doesn't make sense is the healing process.
Exactly.
Already. Yeah.
And that will naturally replace it with another way of seeing or another perspective or another belief. That because this limitation that I believed in is not true, that I'm not worthy is not true. I'm seeing it now from a different angle. I am worthy no matter how many people show up, for example. Yeah. So it naturally shifts into a supportive belief. And that has an expiration date too, where it will be upgraded again and so on and so forth.
Awesome. And still, these are some thoughts and some concrete pieces of insight and advice in the context of the empowerment part of spirituality. And let's dive into the enlightenment part of spirituality. And then again, the how-to question, which probably you will bend into something else, but that's the question that a lot of people have. I have the desire to be enlightened or to make a few steps towards the being of enlightened. And Bentinho, tell us, how can we do that?
Different ways, different paths. I've tried to make it my job to make it as simple and distilled as I can for a modern day people, civilization.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of traditions and there's a lot of lineage and there's a lot of symbolization and religion around these things. But at the heart of it, it's a matter of becoming aware of that which is aware. It's the retracing of one's own attention. So if instead of being focused on a thought or an emotion or an object or this table or this person, if you switch your attention to the fact that you're aware of being here and place less and less attention on what is appearing here, but more and more attention on the fact that you're aware, what begins to sort of shine from within is this sort of a clarity, a brightness, a self-remembrance of, wait a second, I exist. For the past so many hours or days or weeks or months, I didn't stop to recognize that I exist, that I am. And by simply pausing for a moment, not chasing after an experience, not labeling anything, not being distracted by what moves and changes, but becoming aware of this sense of being aware, the sense of I exist right here, right now. Not as this or that, not as a body with a suit or a face with hair or a person with emotions, but just the very quality of I am, I exist. So it's like awareness or attention is turning in on itself, like 180 degrees. Normally it's all outward. I'm focused on you, what you're saying, what you think of me, what I'm thinking. But even attention on my own thoughts and emotions is still outward. We call that inner work. And in a sense, you could say it is. But it's still attention on objects, on thoughts, on things, not on itself.
Yeah.
And what we are is attention itself. Not quite the way people understand attention. It's a little more shallow. But if you stick with attention on attention, or concentration on concentration itself, or bewustzijn, gewaar van bewustzijn, awareness, aware of being aware, then something truly magical begins to happen. There's this glimpsing It's like a light of brightness, of vividness, of clarity, of enlightenment begins to illuminate our attention from within. And the more we practice this, the more it begins to outshine our attention on thoughts and emotions and our belief systems. It's like someone turns the light, the background light up, like brighter and brighter. And suddenly it's like this light, hard to describe, but this light, this bliss, this overwhelming clarity on existence itself, this timeless, ever-present awareness becomes known to itself. And just like when you're focused on our dialogue, you're not as aware of the table. Or when you're aware of the grooves in the table, you're not as aware of me. So too, if I'm aware of awareness, for that moment, I'm not as aware of my thoughts and emotions and other people. So I'm centered in myself right away. So let's use an example of when you're on stage and there's like 200 people waiting for you to start. And maybe you experience some nervousness or whatever, or some thoughts like how to begin this. I'm just making things up. Maybe you don't experience that, but and what they're thinking, and you're aware that you have a body and that you're on stage. And what if in that moment you could be aware of awareness, even for just 4 seconds, and in those 4 seconds the whole audience would disappear. If that attention was pristine enough, if you received some training in this, if you trained in this, it becomes so powerful that no matter the circumstance, you can instantly find this sense of being home, being consciousness, being not this or that, but just existing as this formless presence of light or consciousness. And you would begin to feel a unity, a oneness, a wholeness with every experience in your life, every event, even your negative emotions, even other people that don't like you, and so forth. Because it outshines everything. It's brighter. It's like holding a candle to the sun. It's like you don't notice the candle. It's just the sun. And this is where that oneness or unity consciousness begins to take a hold in a being.
And in one sentence, would you say it's becoming aware of I exist?
Yes, very much so.
And you said if you train this, you can even feel this even for 4 seconds before you go on stage for a huge crowd. How can you train this awareness?
Just by doing it. Just by being aware of awareness. Just by being aware of I exist. It's the same thing, essentially. But whatever resonates better. Being aware of the fact that I exist instantly for those 2 seconds. I'm not aware of the paper here. I'm not aware of what you're thinking or saying. I'm not even aware of what I'm thinking, because I'm aware of the fact that I exist and that this existence is conscious of itself. So it's like taking a bath in yourself, where for most people, we're just always out there, out in the desert of senses and thoughts and belief systems and experiences. And when awareness or attention goes back to its source, its own self, it's like coming back into the cool, pleasant shade inside this desert. It's like finally there's this tree and there's some shade and there's a little water here, and it feels liberating. Initially it just feels like sort of a comfortable like ease, like a relaxation falls over us for just a few seconds, but it's refreshing. It refreshes us. Even 2 to 5 seconds of awareness, aware of I exist, just letting go of the world a little bit. It's refreshing. But now imagine doing this more and more and amping up the attention on it, like increasing the brightness of it. And that's really where it starts to be worthy of terms like enlightenment and freedom and liberation and light and luminosity, is because it becomes so bright. It's really a magical phenomena. It's like the source of everything in your every experience, because nothing is known to you without the power of knowing. All that you really are is the power to know. The body is known by you. The body doesn't know you. You know the body. Your thoughts are known by you. Your thoughts don't know you. You know your thoughts. So you're not your thoughts. You're not your body because you know the body. You know the thoughts. You know other people. You know the experiences in your life. You know whether you feel good or bad. So what if happiness is not an experience, but it's what we are, and we've just forgotten to recognize it? And it's just a simple shift, a simple matter of recognizing the fact that right now I am aware of my speech. And then to not focus on the speech, which is what mindfulness can kind of do. Mindfulness is a good initial step to enlightenment, but it's definitely not the whole path. So you can be aware of speaking. You can be aware of making a cup of tea, of chopping wood and carrying water and so forth. You can be aware of what you're feeling. But what I'm saying is the next step is to be aware of the awareness and to kind of let go of chopping wood and carrying water, letting go of your attention on the thoughts and the emotions, and just absorbing attention back in on this feeling of I'm conscious and I exist. Just the knowledge, just that awareness, I exist.
And what changes in your life when you start doing this, and when you start getting better at this, and when you start experiencing more of these moments during the day?
Nothing and everything. What changes is your state of consciousness, your state of being. What changes is the only thing that matters, which is your experience. What doesn't necessarily change, although it does also, but is your environment or the things that you experience. So nothing has to change. That's the beauty of this. Nothing has to change. You don't have to become enlightened. You don't have to look a certain way. You don't have to dress a certain way. You don't have to believe a certain belief. You don't have to have certain thoughts or emotions, or not have certain thoughts and emotions, because the power to know is present throughout every thought and emotion. Without this root consciousness, without this background of awareness that's always here, we would not know that we're having a positive or a negative feeling. So what if happiness is not a positive feeling? What if it's not caring about the positive or the negative feeling? Not that we can't observe them and look for the belief, because that's also a valuable practice. But what if, like Jiddu Krishnamurti said once, is, you want to know my secret? I don't mind what happens. What if happiness is the natural state of what we are, and we cover it up by chasing an experience, or trying to get rid of another experience, or trying to change things?
Sure.
Not saying we shouldn't change things, because there's value to that too. But primarily, when it comes to seeking happiness, if we can realize that we'll never be happy in experience focus, in the state of attention on an experience, on labeling it, describing it, putting a category on it, judging it, trying to get rid of it, trying to change it, replace it, fix it. What if we realize that happiness is what shines forth like a baby, causeless, joy? A baby doesn't have these ideas. It's not trying to change its experience. It might cry when it has cramps, but it doesn't try to change its thoughts or emotions. Yeah. But yet you look a baby in the eyes and there's this innocent light that shines. Almost everyone can relate to this. We want to get back, but in a mature, actualized way. We want to get back to this brightness, this consciousness that has no cause. The happiness with no cause is the true happiness. Yeah. So what if happiness is not caused and it's not an experience? What if it's what we are? That power to know, which right now is here hearing my voice. And right now it's here hearing my voice. And I could smack myself in the face. I could poke my eyeballs out. I could have negative thoughts, positive thoughts. We could have a great dialogue. We could have a terrible dialogue. And then an hour later, the power that knows that is still absolutely unaffected. Like the screen is unaffected, no matter whether the movie is disastrous or a horror flick or a comedy. None of the appearances, none of the phenomena ever affected the screen. But we get distracted by the phenomenon. We chase experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people see happiness as, or they mix being happy with having a pleasurous moment. So when you experience positive emotions, you're having pleasure in the moment. And I think, and I hear the same in what you are saying, that is not happiness. Those are just moments of pleasure, but that's not the real happiness.
This is such a great entrance point into kind of showing people how the empowerment path and the enlightenment path come together ultimately. Not initially, but ultimately.
Yeah.
So you were saying, I think most people associate happiness with a moment of pleasure or having good feelings and good emotions.
Yeah.
If we remember the emotions being a guidance system. So if I feel negative emotion, it means somehow in my thinking, in my vibration, in my energetic activity, in my mental activity, I'm going against the flow of that true self. Now, if I feel a positive emotion, from a state of enlightenment, every emotion is a negative emotion, by the way, because everything is a distraction. Every thought is actually not the truth. But from a relative point of view, being used to having all these human thoughts and emotions, when we feel a positive emotion, this indicates that our thinking, that our mental activity is starting to align itself, at least in that moment that we're feeling the sense of joy.
Yeah.
We're starting to align our thinking with that truer self. If you were to take this all the way, and let's say that all your thoughts were super aligned, your way of seeing life would be so aligned with the way that God sees life, or that the way that your higher self sees life, or the way that this oceanic intelligence sees things, accepts things, loves things, radiates, all that is, then the individual mind becomes so transparent to that underlying true self that it's like an open window, or like a window that gets cleaned, and now the light of the sun can shine through that mind. So literally what a moment of emotional pleasure is, it's us kind of wiping a little spot on our dirty window so that the light of, call it God, call it love, call it the true consciousness, can shine forth. We don't interpret it that way typically, but when we feel elated, when we feel relieved, I thought this was going to go bad, but now I have the thought that it went really well. Nothing in our environment says ever something is going bad or something is going well. That's completely our projection. We label certain colors and shapes coming together in certain timings bad, and we label certain colors and shapes coming together in certain timings as positive or successful or good. So when we have the negative label, we go against the grain of wholeness and oneness and radiance and generosity and perfection. And when we have the thought of, wow, this is really great, I'm successful now, or this went really well, now our thoughts, our vibrations are aligning with that unity consciousness, that true consciousness. And so it's like we open the window in the back of our minds a little bit more. We open that door a little bit. And the little glimmer of light that comes from that true consciousness, that true self, that shines forth, we experience that as pleasure or happiness.
Yeah.
But what if we could open that door, no matter what's happening in the house, and even step out of the house and just bask in the sunlight, regardless of experiences, because they come and go. Happiness doesn't come and go.
Yeah.
The true happiness does not come and go.
And to make it maybe even more concrete, if people want to practice this, the consciousness of I exist, so stepping out of the house and feeling the sun, just happiness is the awareness of I exist. Do you mean by that, I don't know, every day sit on the couch by yourself and focus on the consciousness of I exist for 10 minutes, or, you know?
That'd be great. That'd be fantastic.
Cool.
Yeah. I often teach sort of two things, or suggest two practices. One is indeed sort of a more formal sitting, call it meditation if you will, where for a more dedicated amount of time, whether it's 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 2 hours, you just relax your body and mind. And as often as you can, you remind yourself that you exist. And you feel that. Before any of the words or thoughts, even before you say, I exist, recognize that before you said it, you already existed. Before you hear my next word, you already exist. Right now, you already exist. You can't change that. You can hear what I'm saying, not hear what I'm saying. You can be thinking, not thinking. You can't change that. There is a presence, a power of consciousness that's here observing this, no?
Yeah.
You want to align to that. You want to recognize that. You want to give yourself space to feel that, to get to know I am, that consciousness. So that's what you were suggesting, like 10, 20 minutes, just sit and just do that. Then also take it into your everyday life by using the 2 to 5 seconds method, where you just create little pauses throughout the day. You just like, maybe you're noticing you're tense about something and you're like, oh yeah, this teaching of this podcast that I heard, let me just relax this train of endless thoughts and recognize that I even exist to be able to be aware of thoughts to begin with. Let me be grateful for the source, without which I couldn't complain about my boss or about this or that. I'm complaining, but I'm not grateful for the fact that I can even complain because I exist. Or I'm feeling hopeful or joyful, or I can't wait to see this person. Oh, great, but I'm forgetting to recognize that I can even meet with that person because I exist. You see, consciousness, beingness, I am, that intangible principle of existing can be recognized by our minds. That's the beauty of being human. We can actually enlighten ourselves. We can realize consciousness. We can realize the creator itself. So we take 2 to 5 seconds to cut through the chain of thoughts and cause and effect and sensations and focus on the world. And we just instantly, for a moment, become aware of awareness. We rest as awareness. And then we go on with our day. And we do that many times a day, just 2 to 5 seconds. If you can combine that with like a 10 or 20 minute, more dedicated, more concentrated session in the morning or evening or both, you're going to see a lot of difference in 3 months, a lot of difference.
Wow.
You're going to feel free and blissful.
And how many moments per day or?
I typically say at least 12 a day.
Okay, cool. But and how many times do you experience the consciousness of I exist?
For me, it's been so realized that it's here. It's like I can't deny it anymore.
Yeah.
So even as I'm dialoguing with you, there is this radiance, this outshining background awareness that's known to itself.
Wow.
So with practice, that becomes stable.
And can you, in the last podcast, you said some things about that, but maybe you can tell us about some more. What has been your path to enlightenment, so to say?
An incredibly strong desire to find the source of life, to find the answer of all answers, to find the solution to all problems, combined with lots of psychological suffering, depression, frustration, impatience. The combination of that friction of suffering and the desire for the truth just burnt me up like a flame in front of the sun, if you will. So the intensity of desire, it depends. Like you said at the beginning of the podcast, maybe people don't really want to like go all the way, where it's not like everyone that's listening right now, their main ambition is enlightenment. I want to be like the Buddha or anything like that. Yeah. But they may just want to sort of bring some relief into their life, and they may want to start that path a little bit and get a little clearer on that. So it really depends how far you want to take this. Depends on the intensity of one's desire.
Yeah.
For me, the desire just from the age of 15, 16 was incredibly strong. So I had no choice. That's what it felt like. I had to. It's just this very strong inner calling.
Yeah, and you said you experienced frustration, depression. Where did that came from?
My thoughts.
Beliefs. What did your thoughts and beliefs say?
So many things, like whatever human being would relate to. Often it had to do with like relationships or not feeling loved or being betrayed or backstabbed kind of thing, cheated upon. Also like the fear of, or like the lack of passion for anything in life. Kind of feeling like anything external, any particular experience like not fully being on the shore of enlightenment, but knowing about it, recognizing it, and then it starts to deconstruct my relative life, but I wasn't ready to fully go into the light, so to speak. So then you're left with this world that doesn't seem appealing.
Yeah.
But all these are symptoms because of the intensity with which I was seeking also. So then everything heats up, right? It's not for everyone to do it that way. Yeah. I don't recommend it per se. I recommend people desire this, but that's up to them. The more they suffer, the more they will desire this. But it's just a combination of total intensity and relationship struggles and just internal like existential angst and depression and so forth.
And so the desire was huge. You couldn't ignore the desire.
Yes.
How long, in terms of years, maybe, did it take you to reach the state you're in right now? That you say, well, the consciousness of I exist is always there.
Well, it took me as long as to now. So I started this, I had my first sort of awakening really to this essential, ever-present here-ness around the age of 18. Before that, I was familiar with it to some extent, but it was mostly intellectual. But that's really when I recognized that it's not something I will move towards. It's what's already here. So it was a big shift for me in my attention. And ever since, it's just been deconstructing my psychology, like turning it completely inside out over time, emptying out all my belief systems and so forth. And so then that light becomes less and less obstructed by the dust on the window. The window opens more and more. The door opens. And you could even say you just step outside the building at some point.
Yeah.
So how long? I mean, it's still intensifying in brightness to this day. It's not a static thing. It's an alive, living, all-consuming reality.
And what do you do when you experience negative thoughts or emotions? There must be moments where that happens to you as well.
Not very often, but when it does, not very often anymore, but when it does, it's not really seen as negative anymore. So it doesn't really matter what happens, like I was saying. It's like everything becomes a different shade of light. Everything becomes a different shade of peace. Everything becomes a different shade of love. But where in the beginning we labeled as good, bad, that all starts to soften and kind of dissolve into this oneness, this like uniform, evenly distributed light. So it's hard for me to believe in these thoughts when they arise. And when they do, and there is some kind of an emotional remnant there, then if it's like PTSD-ish, meaning it kind of is triggered by something that has a relationship to the past, and before I know it, there's this gut feeling in response to it, there's still that awareness at the same time that's also there. So first of all, that awareness reveals that it's not unsafe, that it's not something to worry about. So there's an immediate acceptance of the feelings as they shift and change. And if it's something that reoccurs, then I go look at what must I still believe somewhere that I'm not aware of. What is a belief that's making me feel this way? And then you just have less and less disruptive feelings, so to speak, distracting feelings. Yeah. But the one does not exclude the other. People can have emotions and have an awareness of peace. Yeah. That's why I say happiness is not an experience. Yeah. That's really an important shift to make at some point in our maturation of self-development. It's to realize, okay, I've been on this path of self-development. I've been chasing positive experiences, empowerment. But really, I still feel kind of stressed. I still feel like I'm going back and forth and ping-ponging. What do I really want? I just want to feel whole. I just want to feel amazing. I want to feel that peak moment, but I want it to not be dependent on my circumstance. Yeah. And that's really when we mature in our desire for the happiness that has no cause. That's our nature.
And then again, as you said, how bad do we really want it? Mm-hmm. Because isn't it the case that a lot of people are addicted to the rat race of negative emotions? And
yeah. what helps is to investigate, why do I do that? Because we always move in the direction, we always devote ourselves and dedicate ourselves to something that we believe benefits us. There's no exception to this, I have found.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm doing something that I know is not generating happiness, or that I know is kind of foolish, or it's like, I don't really feel that good when I'm doing it, but why do I keep doing it?
Yeah.
If you find out what you believe about where that action or activity or connection or relationship, the promise that you believe it holds for you, the hope in, this will give me that.
Yeah.
If you can find that belief, and again, look at it until it seems to not make sense, then it's like you're free of putting all your energy into this thing that you were chasing. And you're like, I don't actually even want it. I just thought I did. And then that happiness shines through more. And that inner mirror gets cleaner and cleaner. That inner window gets more and more transparent to the light of God.
Yeah.
To the light of that which is, which cannot be described, but it's so ever-presently here, knowing every single experience. Otherwise, I couldn't be here, and I couldn't talk to you, and I couldn't complain, and I couldn't feel depressed, and I couldn't feel happy. It's because of this root something. And we have the capacity, the magical ability to become aware of that.
Yeah.
That is enlightenment.
Awesome. And maybe let's end with the topic of self-love. How much self-love do you experience?
Oh boy. So much so that I'm hated for it by some.
Yeah, it's frustrating for others how much self-love you have.
Yes. This world cannot handle self-love. Not set up that way yet. I experience a shit ton of self-love, just as the natural state of what I am, to the point of freedom, love, and there's no distinction between me or others.
And what do you mean by some people get angry by it, or?
Well, if you expose a dense system of thoughts and negative beliefs, and we call that human, we call that normal. Right? What we call normal is very sick. It's very, very sick, in my opinion.
Yeah.
From the perspective of this wholeness, this light, this unity, what we call human normalcy, it's very distorted. So if you show something that does not fit with that, and this light definitely does not fit with that, or at least so they believe, then everyone's going to be offended. They're going to have their panties in a twist, as they say. Over the light that they fight it. They fight the happiness. They fight the joy, and they call it arrogant, or they call it narcissistic, or they call it fake, or whatever they call it, because they can't believe that someone can be happy or radiant or know some of the things that I seem to know, or talk in that way, or talk with such confidence on these matters, or make certain claims about my experience, because they don't experience that. And they don't believe they can. Therefore, they believe nobody can. And therefore, they stop their own seeking. And if they can't get there, then they'll try to bring down that which claims to be there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that in the awareness, in the consciousness of I exist, there is loads of self-love. But is there something else you can advise people to do to connect more with self-love, to be less dependent on the bevestiging, the acknowledgement, the validation of other people?
Ah, nice. I see.
So more, how to tap more into the love that is within you.
First of all, you just have to, like I said, you have to be tired. You have to be just be so done with hating yourself. So done with making your sense of self-esteem and self-worth dependent upon what someone else thinks. Like, you just got to see how ridiculous that is, first of all. And people know it's ridiculous, like, we shouldn't care about what people think of us. But when it comes down to it, we still believe that it's reasonable. We still think it's fine, it's normal to believe that.
Yeah.
But we really got to see how ridiculous it is to not live, to not love ourselves, to not flow with this energy, to not express our calling, to not believe in ourselves, just because there's a whole bunch of naysayers that are unhappy. And we're not going to help them by staying in their paradigm.
Yeah. But let me give you a super simple example, which I think everyone can relate to. Let's say you're dating, and you had the first few dates, and then you have the conversation via the SMS or via the WhatsApp. And then there's this thing, okay, I've sent a message like 2 hours ago, and he or she still hasn't responded. Oh my God, does he or she still like me? I can see that he or she did read the message but didn't respond, and then we get like insecure. So the exact opposite of that situation would be that you have loads of self-love and you're chill either way. So what is happening here, and why are we so dependent on the validation of that other person that we're dating?
Well, because we believe they contain our happiness, they benefit us somehow. And that if they validate us, then that would mean the world to us. That would mean something really profound. Because somehow we don't believe that we have the authority to decide that we are amazing, that we are worthy, that we are wanted by the Creator, that we are actually desired by God, otherwise we wouldn't be here, that we are desired by life, otherwise we wouldn't be here. We've minimized our awareness of our spiritual nature, our magical nature, our whole nature, to this very narrow series of thoughts that humans came up with. So when we can constrict ourselves like that for a long enough period of time, which most humans do, now, because my search for happiness can never end, because this is my lifeline to source. I can't. There's not a single creature in existence that doesn't have, at the deepest part of their being, a desire for happiness, a longing for union, for the Creator, for however you want to say it. So as a human being, with all my negative thoughts and having minimized myself to this idea of I'm this body, this mind, and this person, and if someone says to this person something good, it means something good. If it says something bad, it means something bad. If I'm in that state, I'm still seeking for true happiness.
Yeah.
Even though I've clouded myself from it. So now what do I do is I'm going to project and believe that happiness, which I cannot help but seek and want more than anything. It's why I do everything I do, why I decide everything I decide. I just decide on foolish ways to do it. I look for love in all the wrong places, but I am looking for love. Make no mistake. I am looking for happiness. But because of my beliefs, I can now only project it into experiences and environments and other people. And I give other people more authority over my self-love and respect and self-determination than I give to myself. It's a very painful state to be in. And that's the human normal state. That's
and for how to change that is the question, I guess.
Well, kind of everything I've talked about in this session. Because when we find happiness in the right place, self-love starts flowing abundantly. Self-respect starts transforming our entire psychology. It will take some time for most people, but we start to see these things as nonsensical. So let's say then I'm texting and I see like, oh, she read this 2 hours ago. She still hasn't replied. What does it mean? If you know the happiness that is consciousness itself, the bliss itself, that life force, that existence itself, once you've marinated in that, once you've taken a bath in that sufficiently enough, this happiness is also love. It's also respect. It's also joy. It's bliss. So the more I know that, the more transparent I have made my mind to this light of life itself, of existence itself, of pure consciousness itself. Then if I were to feel these feelings texting, I would just get this ping from inside, this little alert flag button, like, hey, wake up. What? And then I'd be aware, like, why am I feeling this way? Like, it's just an old habit. I'm actually, there's a belief in my subconscious that thinks that somehow this woman can say something, think something, do something, touch me, not touch me, and that would mean something, when it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. Yeah. If someone touches me or not touches me, inherently it means nothing. Yeah. This table doesn't mean table. Yeah. We call it table. I call it significant when a woman touches me. I call it meaningful when they answer my text and give me positive words. Then I decide to feel good about myself. Why do I feel a positive emotion when a woman calls me, let's say, oh, handsome, I want to be with you? let's say that they reply finally after 2 hours, and I've been stressing for 2 hours. It's like, yeah, she did. She must have just been busy. Oh, good. Okay, it's not that she doesn't like me. She likes me. So she says she likes me or she loves me. Now, why do I feel positive emotion? It's because my thinking has shifted from beliefs that have a vibration that go against the current of truth and love and abundance to a thought that it's still a distortion, but it is closer in harmony. There's less friction.
Yeah.
The difference between that is huge for me. So I call it happiness, because I went from a really conflicting state to a lesser conflicting state.
Yeah.
And therefore I associate her loving me with the feeling of my true self shining through the back door. What if I could fully open that back door? I wouldn't need any woman.
So once again, you start investigating your belief. And the belief that must be underneath this is that you give her more authority to your happiness than yourself.
Yes.
And then you begin to see that is a really silly belief.
Yes. Plus, it's a lack of self-respect. Plus, it's not attractive to the woman either.
Yeah.
So you're most likely going to repel her at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. we have some questions of our Insta friends.
Wonderful.
Are you ready for them?
Yep.
And let's see how much we can do. Helena, she's just giving compliments. She says, love you, Bentinho. You are crazy. I discovered so much good through you. So that's cool.
Thank you.
Maybe this one is a biggie. Else Simsek, she asks, I know by now you are not your parents, but you do your parents. How can you break through that?
So I think what she means is what we are is not determined by our parents and the conditioning from our parents, but it's something that we do. So we continue to mimic it, to copy it, to emulate it, right? And what was the last part? What was the question? How to break through that or something?
Yeah, how can you break through that? Yeah.
Well, the knowledge that you have is crucial, that you're not your parents. An acceptance is helpful because there is, within the illusion of energy, there is some momentum to genetics. There's some momentum to conditioning. There's some momentum to ancestry being passed on. So we are, in a sense, in our thinking, in our conditioning, in our habits, we and to some extent our physiology, our physical bodies, our makeup, our DNA and so forth, genetics. To a degree, we are, at that level, we are a product of our ancestry. So it doesn't mean that that defines who we are, but it means it deserves an acceptance rather than a resistance.
Yeah.
So the breaking through part, absolutely break through it, but make sure that your desire to break through it doesn't come from resistance. It's okay if it does, but try to accept the situation first of all. Because what's important to realize is whenever we resist certain experiences, let's say tendencies that our parents have passed on onto us, habits and ways of thinking, if I resist it, I actually am saying that I am that, but I don't want to be.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel true to who I am, but I'm saying it does have a power over me.
Yeah.
That's why I resist it. If I accept it, it's like, oh, it's okay. And it's not who I am. So now we can already instantly begin to heal it and separate ourselves from it by seeing that it's not who we are. But if we push it away, we're actually believing that it is who we are. That's why we need to push it away. Yeah. But if it's not who we are, then it can just pass through. It can just be there. We can accept it and understand it and forgive it. And then more and more, we'll experience ourselves as free from it.
So acceptance instead of resistance.
Yeah, acceptance, understanding it as much as you can without getting too analytical about it. But see if you can understand sort of the pattern that created it, why your parents did it the way they did, and why that transferred onto you, and why that. If you can understand the belief system behind all that momentum, it's helpful. But the most important aspect is the acceptance and the forgiveness of it.
Yeah.
Then you're free of it.
Awesome. I think a great answer for Els. Then let's go to the question of Kali Lind. Maybe this is the same exercise that we talked about in the interview, but he asks, does Bentinho have any daily habits that he does to expand his consciousness?
Not really in a typical sense. And I alternate a lot between my habits and my schedules, so I don't have a very consistent thing. No, I would say no. To expand my consciousness, I would simply be aware of my consciousness. I would simply expand my consciousness. Yeah. There's no means to that. It's just the will to do it that does it. So there's no habit needed for me at this stage. I just do it if I want to. I just expand it. I just highlight it more if I want to. But I would say for most people, a meditation is helpful. Contemplation, having some time to yourself. I have time to myself, which helps sometimes to make sure that there is a clarity of perspective with whatever I choose to still be engaged in my life. But I enjoy cigars, for example. They actually kind of ground me. So sometimes I do the opposite. From expanding my consciousness, I actually try to stay more relatable, so that I'm more social. Because if I don't eat for a little while, and if I don't, let's say, have a cigar or something earthly, energetically, I kind of don't want to speak. I don't want to say anything. I don't feel the need to do anything. And it's kind of like I disappear into thin air. So if anything, my habit is more about sort of grounding. And smoking cigars for me is a way to do that. And being social also. Like playing games or something.
Yeah, so smoke cigars, people. No, I understand what you're saying. And then a very simple question. I think Marity asks this. Do you think that you're going to have kids in the future?
I do not think so. Honestly, I've always felt, at least in my adult life, that I have 7.5 billion kids already. And there's enough being consumed on this planet. And there's enough people that are crying out for clarity and for liberation and for understanding of themselves. And my heart goes out to all of those calling voices, those calling minds. And I think having kids of my own, as people call it, which I don't believe exists, but would just ask for so much of my attention, personal attention, that otherwise would go into matters that I believe affects the whole more. So, and also I don't have a desire. I don't have a desire to have kids.
Yeah. Makes sense. Do you have a desire to be in a relationship?
At this stage, no. I'm open to some kind of partnership happening again, but I'm very hesitant to engage at this stage with any kind of relationship.
Yeah. What's the cause of that hesitance?
Bad experiences, I think, in terms of I've used to be like a hopeless romantic, and I probably still am at heart, of the human aspect of me. So yeah, just that nerdy friend-zoned like guy who would just be in love with their best friend for like 7 years, you know?
Yeah.
I've had many different kinds of explorations, different types of settings and relationships ever since. I've been in a relationship with 2 women at the same time that were also sort of in a relationship with themselves. I've been married, divorced. I've tried open relationships, committed relationships. I've tried no relationships. And my conclusion is that relationships don't exist. And I talked about this at length in my podcast, which will come out soon on this topic. But basically, relationship is an agreement that we make, that you behave in a certain way or you limit your freedom. And I will promise to limit my freedom so that I can feel more safe. And I call that love. Right? If you behave in a certain way, then I won't have to face my lack beliefs. I won't have to face my fears. And if you don't do that, then you're cheating on me. It's impossible to cheat on someone. It's impossible. It's impossible to break an agreement. But if you look at the nature of things, we're all free creatures. We're all free beings. And so true love doesn't want someone else to sacrifice their dreams or their path, or even if they have a really relevant exploration with another entity, to try to minimize that so that I feel safe. It just doesn't feel like love to me. So for the last few years or so, the concept of relationship has seemed non-existent to me. It's like I look into the present moment and I can't find relationship. It's an agreement between insecure. It's a contract between our insecurities, and then we call it love. Yeah. But is it really?
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting topic, I think, to most people. To me, myself, I one part of me wants to be super spiritual and enlightened, and not that I am there, but the desire, one part of me has that desire, and the other part of me just wants to be super earthy, and just wants to comply to have a relationship and get married and have kids and
wonderful.
Yeah. So and that's but I totally agree to what you say. It's also a bit silly to say, okay, I need you to limit some of your desires and stuff so that I feel more safe, so that I feel more loved, so that I feel more happiness.
And it's a gradual process. For me, it took many, many, many years to get to that freedom. Many years of investigating myself, because it was one of my biggest fears. Actually, it was my biggest fear, like my partner leaving me, or my partner dying, or my partner cheating on me. And so it took me many years. So I'm not saying people should, it's not a conceptual thing like, oh yeah, of course there's no relationship. This is the end result of a deep investigative process. And I think it's great. If you want to have that type of life, you should go for it. I would just encourage people to see through the illusion of our agreements and the association that we have with being a pure, loving partner by limiting ourselves in a certain way. Just investigate that a little bit. Like, what's so loving about that? What's really pure about that? Is it really?
Interesting,
right? And just gradually, we become freer and freer. And where it used to haunt me, if, oh, my partner, jealousy and stuff, now it's like, it's just a silly idea. And that freedom, the freedom about these concepts, and the fact that you have this light showing through, and that you have this confidence and this power no matter what, allows you to actually love. If it doesn't come with freedom, it's not love. But that's a gradual process. People should honor where they're at in their belief system. But just begin to investigate it. Begin to have a pure understanding of love. And then you'll see relationship is an agreement. Doesn't mean you can't be together. Doesn't mean you can't have an amazing life for like 50 years and sit on a porch when you're 80 years old and like look back on all the wonderful memories. You could do that. Wonderful. But look at the false assumptions of what love looks like.
And do you think that it's, would it be possible for you that a woman would enter your life and all of a sudden your heart explodes, and all of a sudden you are that jealous, super insecure, validation needed Bentinho?
Everything is possible.
Everything is possible. Okay, cool. Yeah, I understand.
It's not very probable. But it is ever possible.
Will be interesting, I guess.
It will be fascinating.
Okay, cool. Let's go into let's do one or two more questions. Kevin Martin, he asks, what advice would you give to a young, aspiring spiritual teacher?
Focus more on your own purity, your own purification, your own enlightenment, than you do on the action of being a teacher. Because really the action of being a speaker or sharer, inspirer or teacher, that should never become a label in your own mind. Others can call you that label, but as long as you see through the illusion of that label, just like the illusion of the relationship label, if you see through the illusion of teacher and guru and whatever they call you, then you ensure that your state of being stays really connected to what's authentic and what's true. Make it about your own purification and make it about truly how you can truly be of service to another. Always check in with yourself. Am I teaching now to hear myself speak?
Yeah.
Or am I teaching because this person is asking for a very specific type of clarity, and I've experienced that type of clarity, and I can verbalize it in a way they can integrate that.
Yeah.
What do they need? And don't make it about your image. A lot of spiritual teachers out there, to my sort of disgust, are really about their self-image. And you got to, and I'm accused of doing that, but ironically, when you're really authentic, you will start to even play with your self-image, which is part of the reason why people think I'm controversial, is because I don't walk the typical path of a teacher or guru. But so be willing to not be hung up on that perspective of how other people see you and the label of teacher. Stay really close for your own sake, also your own liberation, for your own authenticity. For at the end of the day, you want to be able to go to bed knowing that you stay true to your purpose. Yeah. So stay true to your purpose, purify yourself. Don't even call it teaching unless someone asks you, what's your title? Because you're speaking at this conference. Okay, I'm a spiritual teacher or whatever. But always see through it yourself. Stay, what am I really? I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not. So that you're always free, that you're always as pure as you can be.
Awesome. I hope that Kevin will follow this advice, because there's a lot of hypocrisy in the world of teachers and gurus and coaches. And I mean, I'm the first one to admit that I'm not the happiest guy in the Netherlands. Maybe I'm less happy than an average person. That's why I'm so fascinated by it. But I know, and I don't want to rumor in this podcast, but I know that there are like spiritual teachers who do a guided meditation on the stage about being grateful, and after that backstage completely shouting and yelling at one of their employees because one light wasn't put correctly or something like that. I think that's interesting, that there's some hypocrisy in our world. Let's go to the last two questions. Is there such a thing, a free will for the individual? I think, is there such a thing as a free will for the individual?
Free will is the individual. The individual is free will. So it's only at the end of, if we trace consciousness back all the way to its source, it's only in the absolute, infinite, most original, undistorted, stateless, absolute, that there is no free will. But the emergence of free will is almost like the first emanation, the first manifestation out of this absolute one. And that diversifies itself as the individual agents of creation. So yes, what you call the individual actually is free will at the very root of what it is. Free will is a layered process because we have levels to our consciousness. And when we're in an incarnative state, we're only aware of so much of ourselves, a very, very tiny portion of ourselves. And so what we call free will here, and how we try to investigate it with science and looking at the neurons firing off before the choice has been made, it's all nonsense. And you can't capture the true essence of free will in that way. It transcends what we can think of in this way. But yes, free will, the will to know, the will to be, the will to choose, the ability to know, be, choose, navigate, direct, desire, that is all because of free will. Yeah. Now, we do set out, in my experience, we do set out a certain probable life path for ourselves in this incarnation. And that higher level of consciousness, in a sense, surveys that, or make sure that we're guided in that way. So it's kind of like, okay, there is a sort of pathway, but how we traverse that pathway is up to our lower mind's consciousness, our physical mind's consciousness. Yeah. We can resist it, we can flow with it, we can navigate with it, we can be blissful, fly around, or we can crawl, scraping our knees on the carpet.
Yeah. Cool. The last one, this question was, by the way, by Patrick Bonville. The last one is by Astrid Bierman, and she asks, who has inspired you and is still inspiring you in relation to enlightening?
If I had to boil down my two most influential beings, it would be Ra from the Law of One and Nisargadatta Maharaj from the Advaita Vedanta, or non-dual, the Eastern non-dual traditions of Hinduism. Although he wasn't a traditional guy in his teachings, but so Nisargadatta Maharaj and Ra from the Law of One. There's been many others along different stages that have inspired me. The Buddha, Ramana Maharshi, Osho, Eckhart Tolle. It depends on how far back we go as well. But today, what is still the only sort of inspiring teachings or teachers are Ra and I would say Nisargadatta Maharaj, which I just feel a very close kinship with. And Ra claims to not be human, but an ET consciousness of a higher density or dimensional level. And if you read that stuff, it's just mind-blowing. There's so much nuance in this. So I still learn at a relative level. I still learn from that material every day.
Wow. What is the name of the book again overall?
It's freely available, or you can get it in paperback and purchase it. It's called, if you go to lawofone.info, you can find it. So the book is called Law of One by Ra, R-A. But they just came out with a new 2-book edition called The Ra Contact.
Awesome.
It's no human being can come up with that stuff. Okay. This is what convinced me that ET consciousnesses truly exist. Actually.
Oh, wow.
I was 16. Okay. I was very skeptical of ET consciousness. I read this. I was like, mind blowing. The consistency, the accuracy, the way they language, the way they answer, the subtleties. If you can really get a sense of that, it's like no way that this group of people, she went into a full trance state. Like she wasn't aware of anything that was being spoken through her. If you read the material, it's mind-blowing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And it never stops giving nuggets of insights and connecting certain dots as you move on your journey higher and higher into this consciousness.
Awesome. This is a great pitch. I must buy it right now.
Yes.
Well, Bentinho, this is we're 100 minutes in the episode right now.
That long?
That's a little bit longer than average, and that's a good thing.
Oh.
And how was it for you? Is it because I try to make people curious about the whole spirituality and enlightening thing, but also stay super earthy.
I think
like that. How was it for you?
I think you're doing so great at exactly being that bridge.
Cool.
I love your energy. I love your intention, the purity of your heart, the authenticity of what you share with people, the fearlessness that you have in that, or maybe you do have fear, but you have the courage to be authentic, which I really appreciate. The last 2 or 3 years, I've had almost exclusively negative experiences with media being false and distorting and deceiving. So it was a real pleasure to be interviewed by you last time and just to feel the truthfulness and the purity and sincerity. And today I think we got to expound a little bit more on the details of some of the things that I teach so people can have more practical tools. And I loved it. Yeah.
Totally. Well, first of all, thank you for the compliments. And
but you don't care about that, of course, right?
Of course
I couldn't say anything to validate or invalidate your true self, no?
You could and you couldn't.
Okay.
Was it a joke, or do you really think that I don't?
I was just referring back to our conversation about the woman validating you. It's like when we get a compliment, it's like, not that we can't enjoy it, but it's like, why do we extract pleasure from that instead of the happiness being causelessly there? I was just teasing.
Okay, cool. I was wondering. Do you have finally some final words for the listener?
Since a lot of people asked for sort of practical and how to this sort of enlightenment, I did I did an in-depth, if people really want to get in-depth, I did an in-depth 8-week course, free. It's on YouTube. It's also on bentinhomassaro.tv/free retreat.
Yeah.
So they're 2 hours long sessions, 8 of them, and it just goes in depth on the enlightenment path. So I just felt like throwing that out there if people want to
awesome
use that.
So via bentinhomassaro.tv/free retreat.
Yep, exactly. Or go to my YouTube channel and it's a playlist there.
It's 8 videos of 2 hours each.
Yeah.
So it's kind of...
Yeah, with diagrams and like Lots of in depth. So if they really if this inspired them to know more about the happiness that's causeless, and they want to connect their conscious attention more to that deeper intelligence, then I would just recommend this because it's very complete and it's freely available. So no strings attached.
Awesome. And I hope people will do that, and people will have the guts to go experience with the consciousness of I exist. And as we discussed, 10, 20 minutes.
Yeah, just put our addiction on hold for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
A few times a day.
So 12 times a day, 2 seconds, right? And one time a day, 10 to 20 minutes.
That'd be a great combination. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks. Appreciate it.
100% base.
Thank you, viewer here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Bentinho, thank you for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge. Thank you for meeting you again. It was a pleasure to meet you again. I think the viewers can hear and see that. And for you, as a viewer here on YouTube, thank you for watching this episode. This is the last episode before the summer, so maybe watch this video a few times more. I think every time you watch this, every time you hear Bentinho speak, new stuff resonates with you. And share this podcast, share this video with your friends, with your family members, with your fellow seekers for happiness and spirituality and maybe even enlightenment. So share the happiness, share the positivity. Thank you for watching, and see you soon. Cheers.